Hey everyone, my guest today is Micaela Diamond. Micaela is a Tony-nominated actress currently starring on Broadway in the 2023 Tony Award-winning revival of a musical called Parade. She made her Broadway debut in the Cher Show. She appears in the film Tick, Tick, Boom. She was in Jesus Christ Superstar Live. She's on the Gilded Age, and up here, her singular, extraordinary voice can be heard on cast recordings and in concerts all over the globe. She is a graduate of LaGuardia, the Performing Arts High School in New York City. And I'm such a fan of this integrity-filled, gorgeous artist. And I've waited, as I said in our preamble before we started recording, for the right moment. And today seems to be the day. So thank you for being on the show.
A lovely Tuesday. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So much has happened to you so fast, or at least it seems that way to me, an old lady watching your career. But I would love, before we get into Parade, this deeply felt, beautiful, painful, gorgeous production of Parade, that you and Ben Platt just are crushing, as the kids say. I do want to go back a little bit to like young Micaela and sort of who was in your house, where were you born? Just kind of take me back a little bit to like before today.
Before today,
Yes.
23 years ago, I was born in Margate, New Jersey, which is by the beach. We were about 5 blocks from the beach, so I was kind of a water kid. And it was my mom and dad, and my parents got a divorce when I was about 7. And it was kind of from that moment on, my mom and I against the world. And I'm still incredibly close with my mom. And she's kind of like the perfect in between of like, she loves theater so much, but also has never had anything to do with it. So she just kind of places me on stages that I've always wanted to be. The first one being in my living room in Margate, where we would invite all of our neighbors and friends to come watch me dance. Many times. This ended when I cracked my chin open once on the floor, because I was dancing in socks, and I've never made that mistake again. That's a side note of a story, but I kind
Do
of
you have an adorable scar under your chin?
I do, sure do,
There you go.
do.
There
And
you go.
I actually cracked it open a few more times, and the doctor finally was like, if you do this again, like it's really not gonna work. Like you need to stop cracking your chin open. All
You're
to
like,
say,
got it.
yeah,
No
exactly.
more of that.
I can
Understood.
take a note, so I hadn't done it a 4th time. But all to say, I was a kind of an adventurous performer from the moment I popped out, and deeply loved it, and went to see Beauty and the Beast when I was probably 8 or 9 in New York on Broadway, and was like, I'm going to do that, even though I had to leave at intermission because I was too scared of the Beast. And my mom believed me desperately. And when I was 10, I did a community theater show in New York City with kids theater, and I played Marta in The Sound of Music, and it changed my life. And we went back to Margate for 7th grade, and I said to my mom, maybe we should just up and leave and go to New York. And we did, and we left, and my mom and I slept in the same bed for years and years in a studio apartment on the Upper East Side. And I found my way to LaGuardia and kept doing kids theater until I was 17 years old. And it was kind of like the most formative place to learn. And, I just saw Theater Camp, the movie that Ben Platt and Noah Galvin and Molly and Nikki all wrote and directed and made. And they said at the beginning, we wanted to write this love letter to the places where people took us seriously for the first time. And kids theater was that place for me. And the teachers were kind of horrible sometimes to us and pushed us in these crazy ways. But I have to say, it is like absolutely made me the actor that I am today. And I'm forever grateful to the place that was scary and hard and all the things. So that's kind of the childhood story.
Well, it's funny because if you live on the East Coast, you know that like the distance between Margate, New Jersey, and Manhattan, New York City, USA, it's not like that many miles really in terms of like what it took to get here compared to like people who've come from much further places, but they could not be more different in terms of lifestyle and environment. So talk about like there's the idea of the thing, like obviously you dipped your toe in the water, you did a play in New York that summer. I don't know, were you commuting back and forth or did you guys do like a sublet for the summer?
We did exactly a sublet. Yep. We had like a house for just July and
And
August.
like and figured out New York City in that time. So I'm a mom. When I hear, I think your mom, and I've said this 1 million times, my podcast should be called like little known fact, Julie Platt is the most incredible mother on the planet. Like I feel like Ben's mom is also one of the most extraordinary parents to ever exist. And I just try to take a page out of her book when I don't know what to do as a mom. And
Oh,
so I now feel like, what is your mom's name?
Karen.
Karen, is her last name Diamond as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, like Karen Diamond, just the idea of this sort of hey, do you let's okay, I'm game. Should we try this? I mean, A, it sounds like whatever she did professionally, there was some ability to translate that skill to another place to live, or like how did she actually do that? Like there's the romantic version of it,
Totally.
but
Totally.
like what is that really?
It's actually a beautiful question because I think we did have a romantic version of what it would look like. But my mom actually, when we were in Margate, the 3 years before we left for New York, she opened a dance studio for me. And the honest reason why she did this is because when my parents got divorced, she wanted to spend as much time with me as possible. And so she knew I loved to dance so much. And so she hired a bunch of teachers that she found and created this space where she could watch me and like and watch me have fun and like kind of find the happiness within some of the kind of turmoil that was at home. And that's in and of itself kind of incredible. And then when we moved to New York, she was unemployed for over a year, which I think in New York like really is an issue if you don't have um a lot of savings and stuff. And I think we got real nervous for a second. And I remember being on a budget and I didn't get Starbucks when my friends got Starbucks, and the little things that you kind of have to say no to for a little. And then she was interviewing, trying to find a spot where she could be long term instead of finding a job within the first 2 months that she would probably hate after half a year. And she did. She found this place called CADS, which is a private preschool on the Upper East Side, and she manages the school there. And she's been there ever since. And she's going to end up retiring there in 5 years or something. And so the kind of when we moved, New York was not great. I mean, I have to say, I moved in the middle of 7th grade. It's like not only were my like hormones a mess, but I was like, I think deeply sad and had no friends, and all of a sudden didn't want to go on auditions. We had been commuting in and out for auditions before, and now all of a sudden we were like very close to them, and I didn't want to go. I was scared. I was getting really anxious before them, and my mom never showed this kind of like, oh shit, we just moved and uprooted our whole lives, and now she may not want this. But I remember her kind of, we have had conversations now that I'm older, and she was like, I was frightened for a moment there, because all of a sudden, we weren't sure if what either of us wanted to do. And I think New York can do that sometimes. Like anytime I have college students who are coming back from being at their school and ready to move to New York, and they have this picturesque version of what it's going to be like, it's like, you need to take a year to like forgive yourself for whatever thoughts you're having, because it can be this like oddly lonely place when there's so much shuffle happening all the time. And so I'm really grateful actually that my mom was so patient with like my confusion at that moment. And I think like that speaks such volumes to who my mom is. She really has always just like believed me where I'm at and like had faith that things would work out. You know, I remember when I was a kid, a phrase she loved was like, everything's meant to be. And I think over the pandemic, we would sit down and have these like long dinner conversations of like, I think that maybe we don't believe that anymore. Like, I think that phrase lost something, but man, was it helpful for when we needed it. And I think that's such a beautiful way of looking at it. Like we believe what we have to in the years that we must, and then, you know, our lives shift and you know, we are stronger and as people and don't have to live in a kind of scarcity mindset.
Right,
Together
because
grow.
right, the meant to be part sort of implies um we have no control, right?
Yes.
We're just sort of a leaf kind of, you know, being bounced around in the wind. And there's something about sort of the reality of life, like maturing and growing up is like hard things happen.
Mhm.
And sometimes we can't pinpoint the reason. And how do we navigate that? Right? Like, how do we just navigate the unknown? I mean, that's a whole other thing, especially as artists. Like, how do you hold on to yourself, um, your identity when you are not working, right? Like there's a million ways in which we are constantly trying to figure out who we are outside of this thing that we do. I just want to, was the intention when you guys moved, so you're in middle school at the time, so that's pre-LaGuardia High School.
Mhm.
Was the intention for you to begin sort of this idea of being a professional actress? And like, did you have an agent, or what was sort of the idea? I mean, this is a
Yeah.
long time ago now. I mean, we don't have to get into the weeds about it, but I'm just curious because
Yeah.
if I did move my family and my daughter was like, I'm going to be a professional actress, and then we moved and I don't have a job, and you're like, I don't want to do it. Like,
Right.
I like that's so, it's also intense.
Yeah. You know, my mom's loose plan was LaGuardia. We were a few years away, but you have to audition and live in New York at least a year before because that's when the auditions happen. So we were actually quite close to auditioning. So I think LaGuardia was kind of the loose plan of it all. And kids theater was the plan, the harder plan, because we knew those people now. We had spent a summer with them. We loved the parents. We got close to some of the people in the cast. You know, I had mentors. So all of a sudden, I think it wasn't the professional actor of it all. I don't think I was ready to do that, nor did I really want to. I just wanted to be on stage and be taken seriously in it. And I think kids theater was the spot that we knew was there in New York. And so I think, no, my dream is to be a professional community theater actor, if you will.
Well, in some way, you are. The community is just Broadway. That's the
Yeah.
only difference, and beyond at this point. Um, there there is sort of a lot of talk out there about the fact, because it was like, oh my God, an actress doing something other than acting. Just to touch on the pandemic for a minute,
Yeah.
um, post you being Babe in Babe Cher,
Yeah.
and you getting this incredible Broadway debut at a very young age. But culinary school, right? Was that sort of, aside from having long talks with your mom, cooking became this really like front and center thing in your life? Um, what do you think the kind of similarities are, if there are, or maybe it was just expressing a whole other part of you between the art of making food and the art of performing?
Yeah, I think there's so many similarities. I find that there's so.
Micaela, I'm just going to ask you, there's something like, I don't know, is there a microphone? There's something that is just, sorry to bother you.
No.
Are you just talking with a laptop like on your lap?
Yeah.
Okay. Every once in a while, just because I want people to hear everything you say, I don't know if you're touching the mic or moving the computer,
Okay.
and you may not be, but every once in a while it's getting, something's
Should I
happening.
try headphones?
No,
Okay.
it's totally fine. Just be aware that if you move the computer,
Sounds good.
we miss a little bit of the pearls of wisdom coming
Oh,
out of your mouth. So I don't
sounds
want
good.
that. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
Go
no.
on. Okay.
I think there are so many similarities between cooking and performing. And like the more my life goes on, the more I'm like, oh my God, there's another one. I think part of it, and I say selfish, but I think I'm changing my mind when I say this, but as I'm talking right now, but there is a selfish thing about it that's like there's immediate validation. So when you perform, people clap, and when you cook, immediately people like are like, so good, thank you for nourishing, thank you for feeding me. It's like it is a form of like love language. And I say selfish because like I like that validation. Obviously we're performers, we all like it, but I think it is also this like, i think it I think an audience is a relationship. I think that there is such a cycle there. It's like such a give and take. And the more I perform, the more I kind of am baffled and confused by an actor's relationship to the audience.
Uh-huh.
Partly because, I'm at this place where people can now have like a take on my art, which is interesting. Like,
Can you tell me what you mean?
yeah, this is so weird to say out loud, but there's a level of kind of fame where, for example, I am obsessed with Florence Pugh, but she's at a level of fame where I have takes on her art, meaning opinions. Like, I will love a certain movie she does, and I'm like, not her best work, in a different one. But I'm not saying not her best work because I think Florence Pugh is bad. I'm saying not her best work because I fucking love Florence Pugh. And I feel like sometimes now that I'm doing, a Tony winning revival on Broadway, people come to see it and like want to have an opinion on it. And I find that kind of fascinating and also scary that
Uh-huh.
I'm like in this like new level of
Yes.
art. And anyway, I guess the way I'm trying to connect these thoughts is that like when you have an audience and you're in something kind of beloved, and I think Parade is beloved within the community. You never really know, but I think it is.
I
And
think that's a fair statement.
okay, good.
Yes.
There is there is this relationship that you start to form with every individual audience. That's like people are really receiving something, and they can like it or not or whatever. But there is a receiving that happens that I don't necessarily know if like people received Cher in the same way. And I don't mean that Cher isn't art. I think that Cher, so many people did receive Cher in like such fun connecting ways, but I think that Parade is like just a different level of like it's a much more personal level of receiving. Like you can feel, or at least I think I can feel, the Jewish people in our audience when we light Shabbat candles. It's like there's something holy around it. And I think that food is holy in a similar way. Like there's so many chapters of our lives, and food like marks the chapters in my life in some way. And I started a supper club shortly after culinary school because what I found going to school was that like I do love cooking, and I love gathering deliberately and like sharing over something seasonal, some food that's been cooked, that's been labored over, that's been loved. And I think that supper club felt holy to me and felt like I can remember the supper club when I broke up with my ex, and that
Uh-huh.
supper club was healing in a way. And I think theater does that too. Like I remember when I saw The Ferryman on Broadway, and that was a healing play for me. So I don't know, I guess to me they're both these like holy art forms that like literally can heal people. And I have loved dabbling in both. And when I don't have one, because like you said, we can't quite control when we when we
Right.
perform, I can't believe how lucky I am that I got to find the other thing that makes me feel useful in the
Mhm.
world.
Okay. I have, my head is like, first of all, like just even, I just want to go back because I think most people know your story, but I just want to share with listeners, and you can really share it. It's your story to share, but right out of high school, very quickly out of high school. I mean, I have a 19-year-old daughter in another room right now in this house
Oh.
as we speak, right? And so I think about how you were shot out of a cannon being cast in the Cher Show on Broadway. Stephanie J. Block played grown-up Cher, and Teal
Yes.
Wicks, and you formed the three Cher ensemble, as it were.
Mhm.
And even in your comparing the two, I feel like I think I think what was deeply experienced as someone who got to go to the Cher Show, um, and I wasn't like a Cher fanatic, but I was invited to go and I was so excited to go, is it is very remarkable to see people fulfill the task at hand, which is to make us believe that you are Cher. So
Mm.
whether you listen to Cher every day of your life or vaguely knew who Cher was, you knew enough about this icon to have, when you talk about like have an opinion, you had an opinion about Cher. And you were either going to go in and it was going to be fulfilled that they were believable or not. And
Mm.
so you were, it was like a magic trick. Like you guys all absolutely made us believe that you were inhabiting a chapter in Cher's life, so much so that we thought you were Cher. Like that's a crazy thing. And it was it's like such a crazy idea. I felt that way seeing MJ, the musical. I'm like, am I at a Michael Jackson concert? I thought he had died. You're like, what is happening right now? And you guys fulfilled that in voice, in your performance, in this idea of like the three of you made up one person. Like it was very powerful, even though it probably attracted a different audience maybe than the parade audience,
Mm.
but it was unbelievably thrilling. And so for that to be your first show, that seemed like such a hard show, just what was expected of you because of the preconceived ideas every single person came into that room with. Um, you are now sort of the number one lady on the call sheet, as it were,
Mm.
right? We have you and Ben leading the company. You had Stephanie J. Block leading that company. Talk about like what you learned, not as number one on the call sheet, in your very first Broadway show that you have brought into this show.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on what you were saying, I also find that so it's the magic of theater, the suspending of our disbelief. And I'll tie that into what I learned from Stephanie, which is that I feel like, first of all, she's a mom and a wife and a daughter and a friend, and takes those responsibilities so seriously and puts herself first in so many ways. And um that example to watch, like as a young person, and um like a woman in our company putting herself first, I think was like incredibly formative in how I show up in rooms. And she also just like, she walks into a room and says, I'd like to collaborate. And placing herself in that power position from the get is so amazing, because she just won't be in a room with people who don't want to collaborate. And that's so cool. What a great ask. I think that's such a cool ask. That is putting yourself first and knowing what rooms you will be great in. And I think she was so great in this show, in Cher, and like found such an immense power. And at the end of the day, Cher lives on another fucking planet, and she's of a different universe. And I think that like figuring out how to step into her odd power was like really pivotal in making people believe us. And Stephanie really was the one to lead the way in terms of figuring that out. And I will say, like, I think it took us every single day before we opened on Broadway to figure it out. Like, it took every day in that lab. It took every day in Chicago. It took every day of rehearsal for Broadway before we were ready. Like, it was not a perfect fit, I don't think, for any of us. And that was a scary position to be in. But at the end of the day, once we believed it, so could the audience. And, you know, I think that's a valuable lesson as an actor. Like, you can spiral a million times about like if people are going to believe you, but at the end of the day, like you have to. And that's kind of what matters. And, you know, Victoria Clark was, we ran into each other, who won the Tony this year, who was in my category. And we ran into each other in front of Schmackery's, and she was like, how's it going? And I was like, I'm fucking spiraling. Like, this was like Tony nomination season. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. I just like, I am constantly worried if I'm likable and the audience likes me all of a sudden now that I'm nominated. And I don't know why I'm so concerned with it all of a sudden. And she was like, you know, people are going to get it or people aren't. And that's the end of the story. Like, you have to get it. You know that, you know, you've done the work, you know what you're doing. And if somebody doesn't get it, they don't get it. And I think that was such actually great and perfect advice for where I was at in that moment. And Stephanie does that every day of her life. Like, she has a lack of care for if other people are getting it. She knows her worth as an actor. And I think that's how I've tried to show up in Parade, is like, I think I know my worth to this piece. We did it at City Center and people loved it. I can try and use that confidence and like start this Broadway run and like know, you know, that and know that my chemistry with Ben is special, and know that like I am not Carolee Carmello and never will be, and how I am different from her in unique ways, because I loved Carolee. I wanted to be Carolee, you know, like I didn't want to
Wait,
replace
is that
her.
why you bring her up, like in terms of because of the
Yes.
original production? And did you feel like, wait, do people remember that? And are they comparing her and me to each other?
I
Or,
was.
oh, in your mind, forget
Yes.
the audience. This was Micaela.
Forget the audience.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
I loved that original soundtrack so much. And I showed up to rehearsal kind of sounding like Carolee because I had listened to it so many times. And Jason was like, you have to find your own voice. You have to go as far away from Carolee as possible. And once I got that freedom, there was a part of me that believed myself more in this role, because all of a sudden it was mine and I could put my stamp on it. And, you know, I think like obviously all of our experiences compile and then that makes us the actor we are today. But like, I feel the same way about Parade. Like I couldn't have done it a moment sooner. Like Stephanie helped me with that. Jason helped me with that. Sky, my partner, helped me with that. Like there's so many people in my life who like, I had to go through all these experiences in order to play Lucille and like make her the person she is today. But like now I believe it. And like, I have to have less care about what other people think and know my own worth in it. And that was something that Stephanie really kind of instilled, I think, in me.
It's so funny because as I listen to you, I go like, is that, I mean, what you're saying to me is it can be learned, right? Like, I don't know if Stephanie, you know, I mean, Stephanie, who spent a tremendous amount of time in her formative years, not on Broadway, but like at a theme park performing.
That's right.
Right.
It
Like,
did have to be learned, I think, for sure. I
it's
think,
incredible.
yeah, Stephanie made her Broadway debut, I think, at 29. Like she was a Disney princess in amusement parks. Like
Right.
she was doing the regional circuit for years. And through all that, there was obviously some part of her that knew that she was, you know, destined for more, which obviously she was. But I think when she got there, it is a constant reminder to yourself. You have to just keep reminding yourself, like, I'm meant to be here, you know,
Yeah.
back to that kind of phrase. Like, I don't know. I don't know
Well,
how I feel about it.
exactly. Or like, if it's meant to be, I like all of it goes back and forth. But I think about like, you had this incredible desire to tell stories through dance, you know, physically, and then obviously like the idea that you were so devoted to dance, and then also realize that you could sing and have some relationship to your vocal instrument as well. Like, when did those two things come together for you?
I was young, but I remember my voice was like huge and I was a really small person. And I just remembered like the dichotomy of that was thrilling to me, that I could be that loud and take up such power in a room, even though I was really small. Um, so I think that was it. And I mean, I still kind of feel that way today. Like when I love both. I love the feeling of like holding, like actually the other day we did You Don't Know This Man in the show, which is in the middle of Act 1. And
It's a big song for you, for people
big,
who haven't yet heard it.
yeah,
Yeah.
big song, a little bit of a turning point. You're like understanding who this woman is, and her, you know, the dichotomy of power that she doesn't have and she's trying to grasp. And I finished the last line. I said, "I have nothing more to say to you." It's sung. And then I walk away from the reporter into a kind of jail cell with Ben. And every performance without fail, it's gotten applause after the button. And the other day, not one clap, like pin drop silence. And for a second, I was like feeling frustrated and went into the scene with Ben, like, what just happened? And then when I got off stage, I was like, oh my gosh, that was actually like the coolest moment I've ever had on a Broadway stage. Like, I just sang a huge song. I was the loudest I could be. I was at Fortissimo. And then I held every single person's heart to the point where not a single person in the entire theater wanted to make a sound. Like, that to me is so crazy. Like, I think the idea that I could hold applause for 1,200 people was kind of like the greatest power I could have held in that moment. I don't know. I keep thinking about that moment and I can't decide whether to be offended or like really like my ego is like through the roof.
No. But the idea, I mean, of course, always when you're used to a certain reaction, right? You get
Yes.
stage entrance and then applause, and then the next time you don't, they're like, I guess they're not happy to see me.
Right.
It's like it is so hard to explain the delicacy and it is impossible
It's
to
really
describe
affecting.
what it is to be in a show more than once, right? Like, but by the way, you could be in a high school production, and if what happened in the first show doesn't happen on the third show, you're like, well, this was like, we never did it again, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's like we have expectations, and I think um having expectations is the thing that makes us work really hard, but also it can kill us. And so the great Beanie Feldstein, like Beanie would be like, and this was like, I would use it to talk to my kids about every day they went into high school. She's like, I had no expectations in high school. I walked in every day with zero expectations. And so anything beyond that was a win, right? Like, she was just, again, like people I take mother advice from. You don't have to actually be a mother yet. You just have to have wisdom. And I will just, that's how I raise my kids, with Beanie Feldstein, Julie Platt, and now your mom.
I love that.
Sorry.
It
I know.
is such minutia that can really throw you, but the cost is sometimes equal to the great surprise that some audiences give you. So, you know, you just have
Right.
to take the wins when they
But
come.
I just love that you were like, they didn't like it, when actually, like, if you had been sitting in the off, like the audience, they'd be like, wait, can we wait 1 minute before we go on to the next scene? Because
Right,
we
right.
literally cannot breathe, and we can't even handle what's happening next yet. But we've just watched the birth of Lucille Frank, right? It's like you give birth to yourself in this play. Like, we start out in Parade. For those who haven't heard it or seen it, please go or get the cast recording. It's about a person who's accused of a crime they didn't commit, at a time where wives did not have a lot of power. And is it, what year does the show take place, if you can remind me?
1913.
So it's 1913. I did Alfred's play The Last Night of Ballyhoo, and
Yeah.
so I too have been given the gift of talking to a person who has lived experience as a Jewish man in the South. I mean, when I found out, Alfred Uri's episode is actually out today on the
Oh,
podcast, and
amazing.
when, I know you know this, but for people to know, like, his great uncle owned the pencil factory where I mean, talk about like a thread between storyteller and history. It is wild to me when I was like, how did you know about this story? And he's like, it's my family's story.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about with you the power, for the first time, of two Jewish people playing these Jewish roles in this musical that is so much, among all the things it is about anti-Semitism. And I wanted to ask you, because you did write an incredible op-ed in the New York Times that people can find about doing a show 8 times a week that's painful, and how you find the joy at the same time, or you go insane, I imagine.
Yeah.
How do you, in this play that kind of goes from bad to worse, right? Like just in terms of um the trajectory of like person accused, person saved because of his wife's unbelievable authority of her person and taking a risk. And then even with all that, it ending like it, I don't want to spoil alert, but it doesn't end the way we think it's going to end. How do you find yourself each night as you walk to into the theater going, okay, here I go again? Like, how do you will yourself toward the hard part of it? And what do you do for fun in this show?
Yeah, I mean, that I will be honest and say that that op-ed started with the thesis being about how I get through the show 8 times a week. And then it kind of, once, we had a word count and we were trying to, sparse it down, the thesis kind of shifted into this more kind of anti-Semitic theme, and like what that is like doing for an audience and stuff. But I miss some of the language of the joy of what it is like doing the show backstage. And I think sometimes in darker pieces, backstage is even it's like so the opposite. And there's a million things I could tell you right now. I will like name 3 that are so fun to me. One is like the trolley car sitcom, as I like to call it, which is when they're doing the picture show, which is at the very beginning of Act 1. The people on the train are essentially like doing a different show every night for everybody sitting on those benches, stage right and stage left. And the joy that that can bring is so fun. I mean, sometimes they're on drugs, sometimes they're about to pass out, sometimes they're celebrating Pride secretly without the audience knowing, and they have stickers all over their suit. Like, it's ridiculous. So there's things sometimes where we goof around on stage. And then there are times backstage, like in This Is Not Over Yet, when we like start dancing backstage and do like horrendous harmonies, like ruin the song backstage, but it gives us such joy because we're, just finding, the crazy amount of hope in the story. And then, we have our stage managers, stage right, who like will let me call sometimes, and I'll like be able to call the glory and like change positions for a second. So, there are many, many things that we do backstage that keep it light. But at the end of the day, I end the story in quite a hopeful place. Like, all the wasted time is kind of our 11 o'clock number. And that is this love song between Leo Frank and Lucille Frank, where finally they see each other for who the other person is. And I think that singing those harmonies, singing that song every night is so wildly fulfilling that there is a level of disassociating once that song ends. And I think that disassociating maybe comes at a cost, that I don't have the perspective to understand yet. But once that song is over, I try and live in that place. And then the rest of the show is like some dark part of my body that goes on stage and like learns that my husband, has been lynched. And to me, that final, I have 2 verses in that final song where I have to sing before the big finale. And I've always felt since the rehearsal room that I am holding everyone's grief in the room. It is not mine in those verses. I say, Leo, oh Leo, I know he'll protect you. But it's not just Leo, it's everybody who has lost someone and who has, who has remembered a memory that they shared together of when, the last line is, and he's stroking my hair. And I don't see that as something sad. I see that as remembering the last moment of all the wasted time. It's when he's stroking my hair. It's this beautiful memory that I can keep, that I can remind someone of theirs. And that, to me, that exchange, that holding is like a gift as an actor. It is not the burden. And so as hard as those last moments of our show are, they come from a real sense of privilege, a real sense of shared experience, of shared grief. And I think that is how I really get through it. I try and take that moment in. And then I have the whole finale to just, we say the old red hills of home, but to me, home is the theater. So that is my moment to look out into the audience and thank them for that exchange. To the pride that those Georgians feel is the same pride I feel to be standing on that stage. So I can kind of turn a little into Micaela at that moment.
I keep thinking like your 2 shows so far have been the Cher Show and Parade, right?
I
Like
know.
my brain is like just letting that marinate for a minute. There's been so much buzz about what's next for you
Oh,
after this show. People have a lot of opinions. You are in demand. You're at this, I mean, you are still very young in your career and you have already been nominated for a Tony. What a thing to sit there and like watch Victoria. Like how could, I mean, there's excitement and like maybe, I mean, it could be you, right? It could have been any of you, but like I can only imagine the joy that it is Victoria Clark. If it's not going to be me, I'm in your head now. I'd be like, okay, if it's not me, I'm really glad it's Victoria Clark or
oh my
any
gosh.
of those glorious. I mean, what a category this year of unbelievable
Yes,
people.
huge. And I'll just say like a quick ad before you continue.
Yes.
Like I played Margaret at 15 years old at Kids Theater in Light in the Piazza. And like so much of Lucille is like me at 15 playing Margaret, a Southern woman who is like confused about her life and also trying to find her power over her daughter and herself. And like,
Right.
like Vicky inspired this. Like there was no, like, I was like so incredibly happy she won. I was like,
And
I
you're in the
couldn't have
same
won.
category as her.
Yeah, it was
Like
crazy.
all of it is so, and also just hearing like all of the like inspirations early on for you that, not every young musical theater performer knows Parade, right? Like not everyone does. They certainly know Wicked and
Yeah,
other things, but like, so already you're working at a very deep level of interest and passion and historical reverence for this art form that you have joined, right? From dancing on the table,
yeah,
like whatever, out of Gypsy to
right.
these very so it is my hope for you that because of the work that you've done and the respect that you have for this art form, that there will be more choices for you down the road. So I'm not here like breaking news, but do you know what you're doing next?
I do, and I doubt this podcast will come out in the like within the next week, right?
Well, maybe now maybe now there's a special episode. No, I'm kidding. I will be incredibly respectful of
Yeah,
whatever
as long as it
those
comes
rules
out,
are.
yeah, let it come out post Monday.
Okay.
So you have less than a week to
I
wait.
have less than a week to wait, but why don't you share in your voice instead of like playbill.com?
Yeah.
What are you
Yeah.
doing?
I feel so lucky, and I kind of can't believe it, but I'm doing the last show that Sondheim was writing. It's called Here We Are, and it's going to
It's
be at the
really
Shed.
happening.
Going to be at the Shed
Oh
for
my God.
like a little over 3 months, and I start the day after I close, and we start rehearsals for a long time. We have a good rehearsal process to like kind of scope out what this is, and the cast is insane.
So
And
who's directing it and who's in it as of today, as far as you know?
Joe Mantello is directing, as he does the great is doing the great. And David Ives wrote the book, and it's incredible. It's based on some Louis Buñuel films, and it's an array of like incredible actors. It's like Amber Gray and Rachel Bay Jones and Bobby Cannavale and Stephen Pasquale and Dennis O'Hare and David Hyde Pierce. I mean, it's like a million incredible people, and I can't believe I'm one of them. And we're just gonna have a ball, I think, trying to piece this puzzle together. But I'm really scared to do something else. And of course, there is talk about expectation. There's like a slight new expectation that I'm going to have to navigate in my brain. But in general, I'm so excited for this gift of a project, and to work on such meaty material after I was feeling nervous to go to anything else, because I love the
Right.
material I'm in so much. So what an honor. I'm really excited.
If you look back at sort of, I go to high school, I sort of get what what so many kids at that high school hope for, which is like an agent and opportunities to audition for things. And even like that you've worked at Williamstown Theater Festival. Like there's so many bucket list and
Yes.
54 Below, like these sort of iconic, and these institutions that as a young person becoming aware of, like, where have our heroes worked, right? Like, where have they been? Oh my God, I'm on that stage now. I meaning you, not me. What about, like, if you could go back and change anything? I know it's all meant to, like in our new theory, like, do you wish you'd had a little more time before Cher, or do you feel like it's okay, I got through
Um,
it?
no, it is okay. And I feel like I learned lessons that I think everybody has to learn. Um,
Mhm.
I just, and I'm grateful I actually learned them so young. I think like my mom set me up for success when it comes to like adventure. And I think like my whole life has just felt like this crazy adventure since Cher. And I have loved learning on the job, and I have loved trying to be a sponge to other like great actors and leaders in our community. And,
Mhm.
I think like whatever is next, I can look back and like be proud of what I've done so far. I think about the cast recording for Parade, and I can't stand listening to it because I have grown so much since that was before we opened. I mean, I sing the score so differently now, but there's something so beautiful about a time capsule. That is where I
Mhm.
was in that moment, on that
Right.
morning in the studio. And I felt great about it that morning. And so, like, if I felt great about that then, where like the possibilities are endless of like how I can grow. And I think like that, like popping the ceiling off in that way, and like knowing that like I don't know what is in store, but like my life has surprised me in so many ways. And I've been so lucky that I just like, I am on the ride. And like in a long career, there are going to be hard moments and amazing moments. And I'm just like, hopefully prepared for both those things. And that's actually like so much of what this Sondheim show is about. It's like such a weird show with like hard things and great things and like confusing things, and like at the end of the day we are here and like trying to be present, and like
Yeah.
that's all we can really do. But I wouldn't really change anything. I think like I would obviously be better in Cher if I did it today, and yet that is where I was, and people suspended their disbelief anyway. So like we can all just accept what we've
Yes.
done, you know.
Well, I mean, I thought you were perfection. I feel like um it is really, and people make fun of me because I guess I use this word a lot, but I'm not being hyperbolic. You are truly extraordinary. And the way you just inhabit these characters you play with, as I said earlier, like you're just so integrity filled. It's like there's never, I don't know, just the truth just ooze out of every pore. And I just feel so lucky that I am in the presence of you right now, and in the presence of your incredible performances and all that is to come. And what a moment for the theater, and what a moment for this show that you're in, to not just entertain us deeply, but to remind us that we cannot be complacent, right? That we must be awake. Like this is a show about staying awake and love. And you and Ben together, I mean, it's why all these, why it's gone viral. There's something about the way you and Ben sing together. We believe you. We believe in this couple, and we want to have love like that. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I'm so glad you have love in your real life,
Me
and just such a beautiful moment to get to catch up with you. I just wanted to ask you something. When you say supper club, like, is that something you curate? I mean, now you're in a show, I'm sure it's different, but when you mentioned your supper club, can you just in one sentence explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I call it Supper Courage. And my friend Erica Henningsen and I host, and we invite 10 people, 10 different people every time. And there's a theme, and we deliberately congregate over seasonal food and share kind of and toast to that month's theme.
And do you ask, I love her, by the way, and she's such a brilliant artist. Do you ask people to bring a dish, or do you cook everything?
I cook a 3-course meal every time. No one brings shit.
My God. Okay, I'm just going to put that on my bucket list, that someday I get to
Oh,
be
we'd
at
love to
Supper
have you.
Courage. That's so brilliant. You're so brilliant. Of course you call it Supper Courage because you're a genius. All right, Mother Courage. Before I let you go, is there a little known fact about you that you can share?
Yes, well, you actually reminded me of this because at Williamstown Theater Festival, I did a show called Row, and we did this show right after the pandemic. And so we did it on water. It was this like kind of immersive, weird thing at the museum, and we were on water. And so it was really buggy. And I am deeply allergic to mosquitoes.
Oh
So
my goodness.
we would all like maul ourselves in off and of various amounts of of bug
Deet.
spray. Deet,
All the
yeah,
deet you can have.
literally. And yet one day I received a bug bite the day before opening night. And it was on my eyelid, and it blew up so much that it like ended up if you're listening, obviously you're all listening, there's no camera, but um I'm like circling my entire eye from like eyebrow down to like where my nose meet. I mean, it's like it was so large. And yet we were on the water, so we were kind of far away from the audience. So I was like, let's just do the show, it's gonna be fine. And Bernie Telsey, who is a big casting director in New York and also, has cast me in pretty much everything I've ever done, I owe my career to him. He texted me after and was like, "You look battered." And I've never forgotten that because I really did. Like it was so large. But if you ever see me with like a crazy bug bite somewhere, it always happens like during tech week. I get a crazy one on my leg and like can't stand on it. It's like I'm so allergic to mosquitoes. So if I smell like DEET around you, that's why.
That is your scent. That is your signature scent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast today. This was like pure joy.
Yay. Thank you so much.